After 14 years together, he tells me he's in love with someone else and I didn't even care. But then his mistress showed up in my kitchen drinking my tea. He, 39. Me, 39. Mistress, 29. Best friend, 39. We have been together for 14 years, living together for 11. He came and told me that he was in love about 3 weeks ago. I was surprised at the lack of fucks I had to give at receiving such information. I did love him, but maybe my love has always been conditional and its survival depends on it being reciprocated, because it literally vanished the second he confessed to me that he was in love with another woman. He didn't want a separation, but to maybe open the relationship or let his feelings for her subside. I said it was over. It was like I never had feelings for him ever. He was taken aback by my indifference, which I thought, the audacity. Did he want me to be hurt and suffer? I told him that he should be relieved that he didn't cause pain. Instead, he has been sulking since. Last Friday, I got home and Mistress was there, sitting in my kitchen sipping my tea. I felt nauseous because, seriously, I told them that this wasn't civil at all and to never be in my home again, or I would call the cops. I went to my room and I heard her yelling at him for not standing up for her. Then I heard her say something very curious. Why haven't you kicked her out yet? He was trying to tell her to lower her voice, whispering, "Later. We can discuss this later." She left and he came to me apologizing. He said, "We didn't have sex here if this is what you are scared of. She just dropped by because I was working from home today." I told him that he had until the end of March to move out and to find somewhere to be during the weekends. This morning I changed all the locks. From now on, he isn't allowed in my place during my working hours, so if he starts later or finishes earlier, he needs to wait for me to come home and let him in. But his mistress's words stuck with me, so during the weekend I have been stalking her social media. I think she thinks that he is rich, or at least that he owns my apartment. I think she also thinks that my parents' summer house and boat are his. Unfortunately, the loser has taken her there, probably bragging about his wealth because her hashtags were all about the good life. I was telling my best friend all of this, but she was more agitated than indignant on my behalf. She told me that he was a scum not telling Mistress the truth. I agreed. IKR? But then she said I was no better not explaining to her his situation either. I was dumbfounded, but she was serious. I told her that it wasn't my job to bring back Mistress to Earth. My best friend got very angry and demanded that I gave her Mistress's username so that she could warn her. "No," I said. She called me a bigger douche than he is then, and I don't know what's going on with these people. Have they gone mad, or have I? When did our moral compass go askew like this? Can someone tell me that I am not insane? Update 1. So things escalated in ways I wasn't prepared for, and honestly, I'm starting to feel like I'm living in a soap opera. After I changed the locks and set those boundaries with him, I thought things would calm down. But clearly I underestimated how wild people can get when their egos and delusions are challenged. First, let me start with him. He's been alternating between begging and raging. He's trying to convince me that kicking him out is overkill and that I'm being unfair because he didn't technically cheat. His exact words were, "I've always been honest about my feelings. Like, congrats? You're still trash." I just stared at him blankly and said, "You're honest now because it's convenient, not because you're a good person." He didn't like that. He stormed out, which I thought was the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. The next day, I got a call from my best friend. She was fired up, saying she couldn't stop thinking about how the mistress didn't know the truth about his finances and that it was wrong for us to let her believe this fantasy life he'd sold her. She said, "You might be done with him, but she's clearly being conned. Don't you feel the tiniest bit responsible for letting her waste her life on this loser?" I told her again that it wasn't my job to warn her about anything. I'm not her fairy godmother. If she's dumb enough to fall for his crap, that's her problem. My friend wasn't having it. She kept pushing and eventually said, "If you don't tell her, I will." That's when I realized she wasn't bluffing. So I hung up and blocked her. I needed a breather because everything was spiraling. Then came Friday. Friday was a disaster. I got home from work, and guess who was waiting for me? The mistress. Again. This time she wasn't sipping tea like last time. No, she was on my doorstep, yelling and causing a scene. She was demanding to talk to me. I thought about ignoring her, but she was making such a racket that my neighbors started peeking out their windows. So, I stepped outside. She immediately launched into this speech about how I've ruined his life, how he's so stressed now, and how I need to give him another chance. Like, girl, do you even hear yourself? You're trying to convince me to stay with the man who's cheating with you. Make it make sense. I told her very calmly that this was none of her business and that she needed to leave. She refused. She kept going, saying how she and my ex were meant to be and how I was standing in the way of true love. That's when I hit her with the cold, hard truth. I said, "Sweetheart, the only thing you're standing in is his delusion. He's broke. The apartment is mine. The summer house? Mine. The boat? Also mine. The only thing he owns is a mountain of debt and a busted car that's one pothole away from collapsing. If you think you've hit the jackpot, you've actually hit rock bottom." Her face went pale. For a second, I thought she might faint. She stammered something about how that couldn't be true because he told her otherwise. I just shrugged and said, "Well, you're welcome to verify, but don't come crying to me when the fantasy crumbles." Then I walked back inside and locked the door. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Later that night, my ex showed up, furious. He accused me of sabotaging his relationship and ruining his future with her. He actually had the nerve to say, "I was building something good with her, and you destroyed it." Like, are you kidding me? You destroyed it when you decided to cheat and lie, my dude. I told him flat out that if he ever showed up at my house uninvited again, I'd call the cops. He stormed off again, and I thought, surely this is rock bottom. Nope. The next day, I woke up to a string of texts from my best friend. Turns out she unblocked herself on one of my social media accounts and was DMing me about how she'd finally reached out to the mistress. She said she felt morally obligated to warn her about my ex and that it was for the best. I lost it. I called her and asked, "Why can't you stay out of this? Why do you feel the need to get involved?" She said, "Because someone has to. You're too cold-hearted to care." That hit me hard. I hung up, but her words kept echoing in my head. By Sunday, the mistress had posted a cryptic story on Instagram. It was something along the lines of, "Some people aren't who they seem, and the truth always comes out." The next post was a selfie of her at a fancy restaurant with the caption, "On to bigger and better things." I didn't think much of it until Monday, when my ex called me in tears. He said she'd dumped him after finding out the truth about his finances. Apparently, she didn't take kindly to discovering that he wasn't the rich man he pretended to be. Shocking, I know. But here's where it gets really wild. He begged me to take him back. He actually said, "Now that she's gone, I can focus on fixing us." I couldn't help but laugh. I told him, "There is no us. There hasn't been for weeks. You need to move on." He kept pushing, saying how he'd learned his lesson and that he'd do whatever it took to make things right. I told him, "The only lesson you've learned is that lying doesn't pay off. That's not growth. That's desperation." So now he's homeless, single, and blaming me for all his problems. My best friend still isn't speaking to me because she thinks I'm heartless. And the mistress? She's already moved on to some new guy who actually has money. Honestly, I feel like I'm the only sane person in this entire situation. Is this what happens when people hit their late 30s? Do they all just lose their minds at once? Update 2. If I thought things couldn't get messier, I was wrong. It's like the universe saw me trying to find some peace and said, "Nope, not for you." After the whole mistress dumping him saga, I figured he'd sulk off quietly and leave me alone. Spoiler. He didn't. Instead, he doubled down on the audacity. First, he started calling me at all hours, leaving these long voicemails about how he's a changed man, and that he just needs one more chance to prove himself. He even threw in, "I made a mistake, but my heart has always belonged to you." Like, sir, your heart was apparently vacationing with her for the past few months. Where was this loyalty when she was sipping tea in my kitchen? I ignored him, obviously, but the man didn't stop. He started sending me emails. I'm talking essays. In one of them, he wrote about how his relationship with her was a wake-up call, and how it made him realize what he truly wanted. Honestly, it was giving reality show confessionals. He even threw in some poetry at the end. I kid you not, he compared me to the moon and himself to a tide, saying he always comes back to me. I would have laughed if it wasn't so pathetic. But then things got creepier. He showed up outside my apartment building with flowers. I didn't let him in, so he left them on the steps with a note that said, "For all the times I didn't choose you first." Vomit. I tossed the flowers in the trash and left the note unread. I thought ignoring him would make him stop. Wrong again. A couple of days later, I got a call from my landlord. Turns out my ex was lurking around the building, trying to sweet-talk the landlord into letting him back in. The landlord called me to confirm if he still lived there, and I was like, "Nope, he's been gone for weeks." My landlord told him to leave and that if he came back, he'd call the cops. I felt a little better knowing someone else was willing to deal with his nonsense, but of course my ex wasn't done. Fast forward to Friday. I'm at work, minding my business, when I get a text from my best friend. She says, "I think you should check on X." I replied, "Why? He's not my problem anymore." She said, "I'm serious, he's been posting some worrying stuff." So I caved and looked at his social media. His page was a disaster. He'd posted a long emotional rant about how he lost the love of his life and how he'd been betrayed by everyone he trusted. He also took a not-so-subtle jab at me, saying, "Some people act like they're perfect, but they're just as cruel as the ones they judge." The comments were full of sympathy from his friends, most of whom don't know the full story. One even said, "You deserve better, bro." I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. But then I noticed something strange. In one of his posts, he tagged my best friend. I clicked on her profile, and my stomach dropped. She'd shared one of his posts with a caption about how real love deserves forgiveness. I couldn't believe it. Was she seriously taking his side now? I called her immediately and asked what was going on. She said, "I think he's genuinely sorry. Don't you think everyone deserves a second chance?" I said, "No, not when they've disrespected me and lied repeatedly." She sighed and said, "You're being too harsh. People make mistakes." At this point, I was furious. I said, "If you want to forgive him, go ahead. But don't expect me to forget how he treated me." She got defensive and said, "You're letting your pride get in the way of healing." I hung up because I couldn't deal with her nonsense anymore. Later that night, things escalated again. My ex apparently decided to go full drama mode. He showed up at my parents' house. Yes, you read that right. He went to my parents crying about how he'd messed up and needed their help to win me back. My mom called me immediately, confused and annoyed. She said, "Why is X on our porch begging for forgiveness?" I told her to send him away and to let me know if he came back. The next morning, my dad texted me saying he'd had a talk with my ex. He told him to move on and leave me alone. My dad doesn't usually get involved in my personal life, but even he was fed up with this guy's antics. He said, "You're not welcome here and you need to respect her boundaries." I thought that would finally end it, but nope. He went on social media again, this time claiming he was pushed away by everyone he ever loved. The comments were even more ridiculous this time. Someone said, "Man, you're too good for her anyway. Stay strong." Another person said, "True love always finds a way. Don't give up." I was half tempted to comment, "True love also doesn't involve cheating," but I resisted. Meanwhile, my best friend kept sending me messages about how I should at least talk to him and how I was being cold-hearted. I told her, "If you're so concerned, why don't you date him?" She didn't reply after that. The icing on the cake? My ex emailed me again, this time saying he was going to prove his worth by getting therapy and a better job. He said, "I'm doing this for you, to show you I can be the man you deserve." I didn't respond. I'm done with his theatrics. At this point, I'm just counting down the days until he finds a new target for his dramatics. Hopefully, it'll be someone who doesn't fall for his pity party. As for my best friend, I'm seriously questioning our friendship. Who sides with the guy who cheated on you?